All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my final town hall before Election Day. I'm August Warren, running for Oregon's House District 2. And this one's going to be a little bit more informal, more of a question and answer interview thing. And yeah, kind of sum up the things that we've learned from these town halls. And maybe give a little bit more of my personal background that we haven't been able to get into, focusing on the issues. But Kevin's going to be the one in charge, so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, thank you, August. Of course. Yeah, I've just got a list of questions here submitted by some other people and, of course, written down by myself. Uh, but I think you hit it on the head first, that I think most important. Let's touch on what you learned from your three previous town halls and, just going in order that they've started in. What was, the most impacting thing that you learned from the housing and homelessness town hall?
I don't know. There was a lot of things to take away from that one, particularly the complexity of it. Um, there's so many different moving parts, and evaluating the problem on its face, it seems like it should be pretty simple. The problem is that there are people who don't have shelter or security, and they need shelter and security. And we, in the most resource-rich nation, I feel, should be able to provide that. But when it comes to actually trying to make it happen, there's a million different organizations involved, legal complications, and then obviously the way that the government is going about solving the problem is complicating it even further. So it's interesting and frustrating at the same time that there are so many knowledgeable people who are aware of the problem and what's making it worse. Criminalization, increasing rents, increasing cost of everything. How impossible it is to get a job with a criminal background. And that's something that is, just one politician can't solve that. It's going to take a broad scale change in the way that we think about, class difference, really. There's a stigmatization around homeless people that a lot of people, whether they realize it consciously or don't even consider it, but stigmatize homeless people as they somehow deserve it. If they were really hard workers, they would have a job, when in reality, there's tons of hardworking Americans who are barely getting by, working, two and three jobs. If you're trying to support a family, if you have one or two kids, even on a salary of $30,000 or $40,000 a year, which is what we pay our teachers, or like some of our most important workers. So this is something that I kind of knew coming in, but it just hit home even more how you can't just solve this issue with one policy. It's going to take a broad shift, and the connection that really stood out to me was the connection with workers' rights as well. Because I think I may have said this more or less in the homelessness town hall, but um, there's really two sides of the issue where we could take everyone who is living unsheltered right now and put them in a permanent shelter, and get them set up, get them all the resources they need, medical, physical, food, water, job training, everything that is enough to build a platform for someone to kind of get their foot in the door at a job, or find some stability in their life. We could provide that for everyone who's currently living unsheltered, and yet we would still have thousands of more homeless people every year, losing their homes because their rent is raised, or they lose their job because their car breaks down and they can't afford to make it anymore. Or unless we solve the second part of the problem, which is even broader in scope, which is the cost of living, the cost of food, housing, healthcare, all those things, we're going to have more and more people who just can't afford to survive. And especially with wages staying as stagnant as they have, in comparison to the increases in those prices. Um, so that's why it's been a big aspect of my campaign to look at the way that things are connected, and not just try and say we need to put people give people somewhere to stay where they're going to be sheltered, but also, address the workers' rights aspect, make sure that people who are currently just skating by, give them a little bit more security, because that's the whole purpose of community and government, is to have each other's backs, so that if somebody hits a rough patch, we support them instead of kicking them further down. So that was a long, winding ramble, but that was a lot of the stuff that I took. I learned a lot about the local, specific organizations, UCAN and Umpqua Housing, and I also, before those town halls, went and visited Hastings Village, and I forget the name of the spot, kind of on the greenway by the river behind the Dairy Queen, in downtown Roseburg, where there's a lot of homeless people camping, and just talked with some people and saw the conditions, and we handed out some like homeless bill of rights papers on the second time, because hearing these people talk about their experience is just really rough and painful, and the way that they have been treated, by you know the people who are supposed to be helping them oftentimes, or other homeless people. It's just, I can't imagine how I would be able to get back on my feet when these people talk about, their stuff is constantly stolen. They're kicked around town every week. There's nowhere where they can stay consistently, and they're when they when the policies that are being implemented now, are implemented, they will be fined for sleeping outside, which is just going to make it even more impossible for them to get a job, especially, with after the third strike of that occurrence. If you get arrested for sleeping outside, it's jail time and a criminal background. So I think that's really absurd, just on the face of it, considering that policy, but then it's entirely different when you talk to the people who are being affected by this policy. And I just don't understand how anyone thinks that's going to help, except for to the people who think that solving the homelessness problem means waving a wand and making them all go somewhere else. But if everywhere in the country has that mindset of solving the problem, everybody's just gonna exchange their homeless people, which is just an absurd approach. So yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating problem. It's something that will take communities saying, we are going to have a change in approach. We're going to support everyone in our community. We're going to approach with empathy and understanding. And there are places that have done this. There are places that have very effectively decreased the population of unhoused people. But that comes from actually investing in affordable housing and programs that combat, how housing, homelessness is a little different everywhere. Some places addiction is a huge part of it. Some places it's not, but you have to tailor, your approach to the needs of the area. And especially here, I think job training and just a safe place to be are the first steps, because these people have so little. So that was a lot of stuff, but that was a really valuable town hall for sure, and I took a lot of good information from it.
I can tell, and it's good to know, because I mean, one thing that I think is really valuable in elected officials is that they have this superiority complex where everything they say can't be wrong, or that they're on the back end. And I think being able to take introspectively the opinions from all the professionals in the field is really the most cooperative thing you can do. Now I'm going to give it a couple bumps before we go to the next one so we can make some videos. Bump, bump, bump. So what about the election integrity? I know we talked a lot about Measure 117, but I think election integrity goes to a lot more stuff than that. And I know you probably have a bigger opinion on it than just 117. So
Yeah.
let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
we covered a lot in that one. That one, I learned a lot of like very relevant, kind of more specific information. You know, like my starting with 117 was, you know, I'd heard positive things about ranked choice voting, and I have, you know, not been a huge fan of the our current system of voting and the electoral college. You know, there's all sorts of things that make our system not as representative or as amenable to change as it could be. It's built to resist change in a lot of ways. But yeah, I thought, you know, Oregon is known as kind of a state that's willing to experiment with things and try new policies, which is, I think, a very valuable and cool thing. But unfortunately, I think we've seen a lot of times lately, it's almost like policies are passed that are a half measure, where, and we see this with kind of the controversy around 118 as well, where something is implemented that people are calling for, but implemented in such a way so as to make it fail and make it very unpopular. Especially we saw this with the legalization of drugs. I think was done in a way where the people and police didn't have the resources that they need to actually make that approach effective. So then it gets reversed. So I'm kind of wondering with 117 and 118 if there's a little bit of that going on where, you know, I was very unaware of a lot of the issues that, you know, very knowledgeable elections people have with 117 and ranked choice voting in general. You know, I absolutely want to change our current system of voting, but if we're going to implement something, I'd like it to be like a real improvement, because there's all sorts of logistical complications that go along with changing the way you do your voting. And, you know, from what I learned from SAS in that town hall, it sounds like complications of 117 are almost not worth it. It sounds like it makes the actual security of elections and the ability to check ballots a little bit worse, with having to wait for such a long time until all the ballots are gathered up in one place. And then you still get some of the same complications with the, you know, the kind of third candidate losing out or pulling votes from a candidate who may otherwise win. So that was very interesting to get a different perspective on 117 from, you know, an organization that specializes in election integrity. And then to hear about all the other aspects of, you know, their obviously the security of our elections has been a huge topic, thanks to the former president and his his kind of fantastical claims. But obviously, in regards to those types of, you know, election security concerns, obviously it's always important to make sure that our elections are as secure as possible. But according to every, you know, reputable source, they are, you know, completely well within their rights to be considered safe and secure and representative as they can be under the current system. So to kind of hear some of the more absurd claims debunked, but it is frustrating because obviously there are ways that the Republican Party, especially, is trying to, you know, marginalize voters, passing all sorts of legislation where you can disqualify people essentially from voter records. There's a lot of projection that goes around on this issue where Republicans seem to think that everyone is obsessed with lying and cheating as they are. So they just blame other people of exactly what they're doing. Um, so yeah, we talked about the ranked choice voting. We talked about the kind of national election security. We talked about kind of the party system. Obviously, two parties comes with a lot of complications and leads to a lot of not ideal outcomes. And a helpful change in voting, like potentially star voting, would pave the way for a broader variety of parties to compete with each other. Because, yeah, in a way, the two party system just the parties seem like they're competing each other in a race to the bottom as opposed to competing to be the most competent party. Even the Democrats have devolved in this campaign into saying a lot of, well, at least we're not as bad as those guys, um, which is easy to do when your opponent is Trump. But I think the focus of my campaign has been more of providing a positive message, suggest addressing issues and suggesting solutions. And I think the Democrats on the national level were successful with that when they were proposing policies that were directly helpful to people. Anyways, I've gotten off the election integrity a little bit. I'm gonna pull out my notebook here. See, I'll be right back. Should have had this before.
Well, I'm speaking maybe out of turn here, but I appreciate that because I mean the duopoly in the United States is what I think is driving it into a race between not a vote for person, but a vote against. And I
Yep.
think that at least the most important thing to do is realize that. And I mean, back in the 20s, when Eugene Debs was running as a socialist, that's when it was co opted by the Democratic Party. And I think it's a great thing to realize that motivation and structural change like that does happen.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to touch on with the election integrity, the thing we spent a lot of time talking about was star voting, which is a method that Sass endorsed and spoke much more highly of than ranked choice voting, where you can vote for, I believe it was, you could vote for every candidate on a scale from 1 to 5 stars. And then it's just calculated by, the candidate who has the most stars. And that to me seems like a much more expressive form of voting where, if there's two candidates you're not sure between, you can rank one of them 5, one of them 4, and everyone else 1. Or, so the way that they do ranked choice voting, there's still a chance that your vote ends up having very little impact if you still vote for, if you put the overall least popular candidate as first and then the second least popular second, your vote's going to get discarded every time. But if you give every candidate a star ranking, your vote will count no matter who it counts towards. And there are just, I think approaching problems with some more creativity is kind of needed with I think, especially in government, we have such a limited idea of what's possible, or because we see so little change over so much time. But I do think that, like I said, Oregon being a state where we're willing to experiment is a really valuable thing because we're going to have to change our policies in a lot of ways. So whether we like it or not, we have to try. And but yeah, I just think that there are better ways to try probably than the approach of 117. I would like to see a more fully fleshed out and kind of better explained to people change in voting. Like the advertising that I've been seeing around both Measure 117 and 118 is just a little frustrating. It feels like I mean, this is kind of all politics now, but they have a couple talking points that they say and they dance around. They don't really give a full description. Ranked choice voting is a little bit more clear cut than the 118. But the other big thing we talked about in that town hall was campaign finance. I know that there are a lot of countries in the world who do publicly financed campaigns, and there are a lot of places where political campaigns last, a week to a month, maybe. And there's not the insane kind of money that we have here. I mean, in America, it's just the fact that like money is power. That is, anyone who denies that is not living in reality. We have Supreme Court cases ruling that corporations are legally regarded as people, and therefore people have a freedom of speech. So therefore, you can't stop a company from donating to political candidates, and we have legal bribery in the form of lobbying. So our government is completely taken over by corporate interests, and that's just, it becomes a perpetual cycle where if you want to get elected, you need the endorsement of the big, powerful, wealthy people on the Democrat and the Republican side. Um, and therefore, you got to tailor your policy to what they want. Whereas if you have publicly funded campaigns, if you have independent public organizations that do the media for your candidates, like in other countries where they have an independent committee do, voter information pamphlets, all this stuff. There are other ways to go about elections where it's not just whoever can buy the most ads or whoever can, pay for the most mailers or whatever. And I think that would make things much more fair when it comes to, money in politics in elections and in terms of money in politics once you're elected in lobbying. So money in politics is a whole other issue. But if our goal is to have elections be as fair and representative as possible, then addressing campaign finance is absolutely very high up on that list.
And I think it is for a lot of people in Douglas County. But with that, I'm gonna give it a couple more bumps and then we'll move on to the next topic. Bump, bump, bump. Uh, environmental and economic sustainability, because I know those are really important. One, in your line of work, and two, from your degree. So maybe it would also be an interesting time to bring up some of your history with this.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. Got to talk to some really cool experts who I've heard a lot about and kind of been excited to hear from. And we walked through the good old rural New Deal. I've read through this before and think it's a really well done, comprehensive approach. Obviously, a lot like the Green New Deal, it is just more of a statement of aims. There's no concrete legislation or policy behind it yet, but we need it. We need a broad scale reform. We need something similar to the New Deal of the Great Depression. Right now, I think our economy is in a big old bubble, and we can address it before it pops or after. But there are so many people who need jobs that pay a living wage, and there's so much work that needs to be done, especially when it comes to the health of our land. And I think the Rural New Deal is a really good approach to that, especially in the bioregional aspect of it, where it makes sure that local people have control over local resources and that those resources benefit those local people. What we're seeing in rural America all over the country is, big corporations, like I was just talking about, money is power. Big corporations can come in, buy up local land and politicians in small towns, become the biggest employer in town all of a sudden, and seize a ton of power and then just drain resources from communities. And like we said in that town hall, there are so many companies that come in, kill local businesses, whether it's, Amazon doing things online, whether it's the big chain grocery stores or the big chain agricultural industries, or the way that the timber industry has all been bought up into one company. Everything is owned by conglomerates of finance, organizations that have no real interest in looking out for the health of the land or the health of the economy overall to anyone but themselves. The profit interest is what drives our entire nation, and unless we regulate it somehow, it's going to drive itself into the ground. So dealing with that means giving power back to people, giving power over the land back to people, making sure that people have the tools they need to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining in their communities. So yeah, just flipping through it, it's a lot of the stuff that I have been advocating for in my campaign, with local control of land, affordable and accessible healthcare, local farms and food as much as possible. And we talked about Richard Chasm's cooperative forest. I think we as a community all benefit from our land being healthy, and we have lost our ability or our will or our perception of how badly it's being damaged now. And so I think we need a lot of people to stand up together and say, this is our land, this is our lives, this is our future. We're not going to let these outside influences destroy it. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation, especially the way the rural New Deal comes together, the way all the pillars intersect and help each other out. With salaries, public education, and public transportation. I think it's a really comprehensive approach. Yeah, I have been very excited to be back at work this week, leading crews out in the field, doing fuels reduction. We finally had a week of rain, so fire restrictions have lifted, and we're back out on the saws. I started working with OCC out of Phoenix School last October, yeah, about a year ago, and just hopped on as a crew member and worked my way up. First as an assistant and now as a lead with OCC and OIC. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I have absolutely loved the work. I did trail work with Siskiyou Mountain Club out of Ashland, and that was my first experience with real backcountry work. And since then, I don't think I could work in any other field. I absolutely love getting to go outside every day, getting to, like studying ecology is my job. I've gotten to go out and do pine monitoring and, take information of how healthy certain pine trees are and how certain plantings have affected the biodiversity. So I feel incredibly fortunate that I get to not only do that and go outside and spend my own time outside, but also lead crews of younger people and adults out and get to share that with them and see how much people kind of come together and connect over working hard and having an impact on the land, and then also see how appreciative a lot of landowners are when we clear their property and make sure they're going to be safe if a fire does come. It's really cool to see how happy these people are, and it's made me really believe that this is an incredibly important job, something that we need more people doing. It's an investment that if we make it now, it will prevent the massive damages that come from a destructive wildfire if there's no preparation. Um, so yeah, I've absolutely loved my job. I've loved, uh, what I've learned. I've loved the day to day. Um, Going back a little bit, I guess over my whole kind of work experience and development, I have been all over the place. Initially, I uh, I graduated high school and through like the Appalachian Trail, which is 2,200 miles from Maine to Georgia, and that was amazing. And that was where I really kind of cemented my passion for wilderness and yeah, the importance of a connection to wilderness. And I've done a ton of hiking ever since then. That's always been something that's hugely important to me, and I feel like there's an important perspective that comes from spending a lot of time in wilderness and especially pushing yourself and overcoming difficult things. I've spent a lot of days out in the woods, pushing myself really hard, and I feel like there's a lot of value that's come from that. I took that after that hike. I went to community college and studied business. I wanted to open a small business doing retail of like outdoor stuff or a climbing gym. I got really into bouldering and climbing, and that was kind of how I enjoyed the outdoors for a while when I got back from hiking, because it's not easy to take 1 to 4 months off to go do a long through hike consistently. So I needed something else to do. But I found that business classes were really like middle management type stuff and not small business. So I changed my degree to philosophy and environmental studies to finish school once I transferred to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and absolutely love studying philosophy and the environmental side of it. I learned so much. I think philosophy is incredibly important. Just learning how to ask questions and understand and consider, and the perspective that comes from. I think there's an intellectual humility and a sense of honesty that you gain from learning how much there is to know in the world and how little we will ever understand. And I think that is important to have empathy approaching other people and understanding that our perspectives are all entirely different, but no one is any more or less valuable than another. And then also, learning about environmental issues, it's impossible not to be um, very motivated to do something about that. Hearing about, it's spending time in the woods on the East Coast on the Appalachian Trail was incredible, but also very sad to see how little wilderness is really left. You have the 100-mile wilderness in northern Maine, and then the rest of the East Coast. It feels like is slowly turning into just one big strip mall, and so that was a big part of why I wanted to move out here, was to experience real forests that are um, back in time relative to the East Coast in a sense. And that's been a big part of my political campaign and why I want to be involved and be a voice in the community, is to make sure that our forests are maintained as beautiful as they are and as diverse as they are, to make sure that we don't let corporate interests just come in and mill all of our trees and pave over all the passes. Some of some inspirations that I had in my time at school were Wendell Berry and Aldo Leopold's, two of my favorite writers, and they talk a lot about the importance of community and connection to yourself, the land, people around you. And yeah, I was we're told a lot of things when we grow up in America about, who's good and who's bad and what's right and what's wrong, and we're given a very strong sense of a very moral view of the world, where there is, these people are right, these people are wrong, this is good, this is bad. And I think a lot of people, that view, when put into practice in the real world, is going to shatter one way or another, because the world is infinitely complex and infinitely nuanced, and the things that we're told when we're young are not exactly true in all cases. So when I was growing up, I was looking to kind of rebuild a view of the world, and something that I could, I don't know, use to motivate myself and understand the people around me and what I should do with my life. And Wendell Berry and Aldo Leopold were a big part of that, in the passion that they have for just life and existence and community. And they really kind of hammer home that, especially Wendell Berry talks about, growing in maturity and responsibility means taking on a more active role in your community. And you don't have to be some finished product or a perfect person, because no one is. But what matters is the real impact that you have on the people around you. And so that was a big part of why having learned all that I have about all the many challenges we're facing environmentally, socially, that was another big part of studying in school. You can't separate environmental issues from social issues. As long as humans discriminate against each other, we're never going to be able to treat the natural world with any respect. um, but Wendell Berry especially, kind of gave me an idea of a world to strive for, where communities work together, are connected with the land, and people share an understanding, because I think that's what we're missing. And that's another thing that I've tried to bring in my campaign, is like, my goal is to communicate and understand and build community. My goal is not to say, this is what I'm doing, vote for me or else. Like, I want to talk to people. I want to, community means not just, communication is a two-way street, where if I'm going to represent someone, I need to hear them out and understand what's important to them. I can't tell other people what's important to them. I can, you know, I can give my perspective, and if people approve of my perspective, hopefully they'll vote for me. But a part of my perspective is obviously a humility of considering the perspectives of others. I'm kind of rambling now. Um, but yeah, environmental issues have always been incredibly important to me. I think that you the core of a meaningful human life is spending time on the land that sustains you, and trying to leave that land as healthy as possible. I think that is a recipe for an incredibly meaningful life, and the connections that come with other people working out on the crew while doing that kind of work is really special. So yeah, wilderness and nature have given me so much in my life. I'm incredibly grateful for the forest here that I get to work out here, um, and I'm committed to, in whatever ways that I can, always working to fight for the health of our ecology and our people, and our resources are what sustains us. We need healthy water to live. We need clean air. We need, land that will grow food and resources. So, yeah, and my goal is to just point out the issues that I think people need to know, even people who are, interested in resource extraction, and don't care at all about the health of the community. Um, they are depleting our resources at a rate which is damaging to their bottom line in the long run. So the approach that is being taken in many areas and many of the issues that I've talked about in my campaign, is not only damaging to the working class and to vulnerable communities, but it's damaging to the entire economy to completely drain areas of their resources and then leave them for dead. Like that's what we saw in the Rust Belt. That's what we saw in the opioid epidemic in Appalachia. Were just brutalized because their labor pool was reliant on industries that did not care about them and were more than happy to move abroad. And now we're seeing a similar thing here where the timber industry is losing steam because they have drained the soil dry of every drop of nutrients it has. And now they're either resorting to pesticides and fertilizers, which are already in all of our water, or they're just up and leaving for more profitable territory in Canada, Alaska, or wherever else they decide to go. So my interest is to advocate for the health of our environment, the health of our people, our communities, now and in the future. And that's what scares me, is it feels like there's startlingly little consideration for the future, from especially the people in power. So I feel incredibly lucky that I was born in a time where I was able to see the kind of wilderness that we have. I wish I could have seen it 100 or 200 years ago before all the amazing old growth was felled. But I want there to be at least a few old growth trees for the generations after us to see. I think that's a moral crime that we don't think about enough. The fact that we've robbed generations after us of seeing anything but pictures of so many different plants and animals and habitats. So yeah, it's a scary issue, and it's people don't like to talk about it, but if we don't address environmental issues, human society as we know it will be gone in the next 100 years. And that still sounds like it's a long way off, but that doesn't mean it's going to be all fine and dandy until year 100. That means the hurricanes that we saw this year, next year will be twice as worse, and then the year after that they'll be twice as bad, until it's just far more expensive to rebuild after big fires or big storms or big droughts. So it's scary, and I can't just sit and do nothing while we actively make the situation worse. We need to rein in the people and companies who are only motivated by profit. We need to band together as people who share a common interest in having healthy land, and having a future at all. Our voices are only really respected when we all speak together as working people, or as those who are not making decisions at the Fortune 500 companies. So yeah, I wanted my campaign to just be a voice out there because there's a startling lack of voices who are talking about issues in the way that I have tried to. You know, I imagine Republicans would accuse me of a lot of things, but if I could have a conversation with some of them, you know, addressed the real issues that, and, got them nodding along that, improving workers' rights helps us all. Improving, our healthcare will help us environmentally. There's so much waste in our systems in every way that you can imagine. That if we just approach things with a little bit of creativity and a little bit of an open mind, I think we can make a lot more progress. I think there's a lot of avoidance of the issue because it seems too overwhelming to really grapple with, but um, we can make change happen. So I'm not going to stop advocating for more environmental considerations. And yeah, you can't separate the health of our environment from the health of our economy. If we have no resources, we have no economy. So um, yeah, it's an important issue. There's a lot there. I spend all my time thinking about it. I spend most of my time working out in the woods. And I would advise everybody spend as much time outside as you can, learn as much as you can about um, our ecology here, whatever interests you about nature. There's infinite information to learn, and all of it is fascinating, and especially gives you a better appreciation for the source of our life, really. That was a long one.
And you did touch on a couple of the other stuff, so I guess we'll save for the best for last. And I know you were talking about greater involvement and just getting to know this community. So what are what's the end goal for your campaign, and what do you hope to achieve while you're here? I don't anticipate you leaving soon, just you know.
Yeah, no, I'm planning to be here. I love it here. And I wanted to get from this campaign a better, you know, understanding of the issues and get a chance to talk to a lot of people. And I really got that. It was an incredibly rewarding experience. It's been very challenging for sure. I've put myself in a situation that I'm not familiar with, but that's how we learn, and I have learned a ton. And yeah, I'm not someone who can just kind of sit idly by. And if you believe anything that I've said about how serious any of the problems that we're facing are, it would be a little crazy if I could just kind of sit back and let it unfold. So there is a balance that has to be there of like I do have to live my own life, and I am very passionate about my career, but I am always going to my career in forestry, but I'm always going to be involved politically. I'm very passionate about issues socially, environmentally, economically. And I think, I'm 25. I am trying to find how I can contribute the best and in the way that is most effective and most sustainable for myself and just who I am. And being a candidate has definitely pushed me in a lot of ways that I'm not super comfortable with, which is, not a bad thing. And I learned a lot about myself and, the ways that I need to grow moving forward. Um, I'm somebody who just wants to leave a mark on my community and try and help people improve their lives. And so I'm trying to find what role I can fill the best with that. I think, yeah, doing as much as I can with organizations locally. It's been really cool to work with Stonewall Caucus and Pride. I was grateful that they let me up on stage there for a little bit. And local environmental groups. I'm always going to be doing what I can with boots on the ground, working forestry. I'm very passionate about trails management. That's since I've done so much hiking, it feels good to kind of pay it back, or pay it forward, I guess. Um, so I would love to move towards career wise, managing some trail management in the region, or running crews. with that. But any sort of ecology, you know, forestry job that I can feel contributes the most is what I'm going to go for. I think we've got a really cool program set up at OC right now. So yeah, I'm going to be helping as much as I can day to day at my job, making people's properties safe or planting trees or whatever we're doing that day. And I'm going to stay active in the community as much as I can. I think my personal perspective, I think, is that I am kind of best as a writer. So I would like to keep writing things for the paper or, you know, for the Democrats or whoever, whatever issues or organizations I can write and submit things to. I just want to try and keep communicating my ideas because, you know, it's hard for me to judge exactly how accurate my understanding of the world is until I talk with other people about it. And so far, the reception has been broadly positive. So I think as long as there are people who are interested in hearing what I have to say, I am interested in sharing it. So yeah, I'll probably, in large part, try and I'm definitely, if I don't win this election, I'm definitely going to need to take some time and rest and recover a little bit because it has been very anxiety inducing for someone with anxiety. But like I said, it was totally worth it, and um, I'm gonna regroup a little bit and yeah, keep at it. Um, I don't know exactly if there's a role for me that I know of right now in government or in the Douglas County Democrats or what. I can't really give a concrete answer there, but I will definitely be around and I'll be trying to find my way into any position, yeah, that I feel I can help the most.
I'm glad to hear that, especially, I mean, there's plenty of boards and stuff that I'm sure you'd be most adequate in filling on. You know, there's some environmental boards for the state and stuff like that. And just getting, you know, continued effort out there. That was all the questions I had, unless you had something else you'd like to touch on, August.
Um, I can't really think of it. You got anything? Man? No, I think that's it. We went to the Mushroom Festival up in Eugene today. That was really fun.
That's fun. I've been out in the woods because I don't have a job right now until the end of the month, so mushroom picking for the last week and a half straight.
It's a real mushroom festival.
Um, well, August, I really want to thank you for running. I mean, I know kind of throwing you from the pot to the fire really makes you learn on your toes and on your feet, but I really hope you had a good time about it. You know, it was one moment from us talking about the injustices over back east to now
Yeah.
you're a candidate and we can see where the future holds.
Yeah, it's been crazy. And I do want to, I don't know if anybody's going to watch this far in the video, but I want to thank everyone who has supported my campaign in any way. You know, I could not have done any of this. I you know, had an understanding about politics and government before, but I knew none of the how to do the specifics of, you know, figuring out how to be my own treasurer and, you know, doing it without a campaign manager. I had so many questions, and there were so many people who were so helpful. And just the support that I saw from people has been really, really. That's why I kept at it and was able to, even when it got stress inducing. The response and the appreciation from people really meant a lot. So yeah, this is my campaign is, you know, an attempt to build a movement. It's not just about myself. So I hope my, you know, the things that I've advocated for and my ideas will carry on, and I will keep trying to carry the torch. But the more voices we have speaking together, the better. So, well, thank you for hosting this, and you're one of the main people I was thanking in that little ramble. So
Well, here's
I
to
do,
next time, August.
yeah, yep, I'll be around. I'll end the recording.